What makes a really good horror game? That is a question I've been asking myself lately. Is it a game with a good story and characters? Maybe it's the sound design, the atmosphere, music, and well-timed out jump scares. Or maybe it's the pacing, the tension build-up, and immersive gameplay. Maybe. But for me, it's not any one of those things. In fact, I think the best horror games aren't even necessarily the scariest. Rather, it's the ones that stick with you. The ones that make you think and reflect, that affect how you see the world around you. The ones that leave a mark on you. A mark that stays well long after you finish playing the actual game. And the only type of horror that can do that for me is the psychological type. I think the reason why psychological horror is so effective is because this type of horror explores themes that we are all familiar with. Themes of isolation, regret, guilt, and trauma. Because unlike monsters or psychotic killers, these things we have to actually live with every day. And unlike the other horrors that may or may not exist in our real world, these things do exist, and they exist within us. And that's more terrifying than anything the real world can throw at you. Having to confront whatever dark, suppressed horrors lay in the corners of our unconscious minds. In Silent Hill 2, James Sunderland receives a letter from his wife Mary calling him to come join her at a small town, a town by the name of Silent Hill. The only issue is, James had killed his wife 3 years ago. Now he finds himself at a strange, empty, fog-riddled town, searching for that same wife. And throughout the rest of the game, we follow and watch as a tormented man descends into pure madness as the reality around him slowly crumbles into a living hell. James questions himself. He questions why he came here looking for her. He knows she's dead, he's certain of it. Yet, here he is, here, in Silent Hill, looking for her. Turns out it wasn't so much his wife that's called for him, but the town of Silent Hill itself. This innocuous small rural town holds a secret, an ancient mysterious force that draws in people who have something that's unresolved psychologically. And once these people find their way to it, the town morphs itself into a personalized experience that reflects whatever a person needs to confront within themselves. It drew in James with the letter from his dead wife because he needed to confront the guilt from the fact that he took her life. This concept of exploring the human psyche like this fascinates me. And that's just one example of what psychological horror can do when done right. Today I want to explore 2 games that I've played recently that have gotten me to think about this just as much as those Silent Hill games did at one time. 2 titles created by one person, Afraid of Monsters and Cry of Fear. But before we do that, you know what really horrified me recently? It's when I discovered just how much personal information is accessible online with just a Google search of a name or email address. That same information is collected by data brokers from websites we visit and is sold to the highest bidder. And those same sensitive details are at risk due to frequent data breaches. A recent data breach at Unified Healthcare affected potentially a third of US citizens, compromising their personal health information. This is why this video is sponsored by Aura. Aura offers a robust solution for protecting your identity, finances, and personal info online. Its comprehensive service is not only easy to set up, but covers all bases in one place. Aura actively searches for and removes your personal information from the internet, reducing your digital footprint and enhancing your privacy. It offers additional layers of security by monitoring your transactions and ensuring both your communication lines and financial accounts are safeguarded. With Aura, you also get real-time alerts on threats on your identity, credit inquiries, and more, along with free antivirus protection and a VPN for secure browsing. So, take control of your online safety by visiting aura.com/virtualcarbon or by clicking the first link down below to start your 14-day free trial now. Thank you, Aura, for sponsoring today's video and for helping keep our digital lines secure. Afraid of Monsters is a psychological horror Half-Life 1 mod released in 2005. It follows a character named David Leatherhoff, who is in a hospital bathroom, staring at himself in a mirror. I really need to take these pills. I can't stop taking them. Damn it. Unable to control his urges, David takes the pills. Huh? Where am I? We awake in a pitch-black environment illuminated by white lines showing us the path. Coming around a corner down a path that resembles a prison, then right to find a small shed. Waking up from this hallucination, we find the mirror broken. Did we do this? Damn, I must have passed out. Making it out of the hospital, we find that the hospital has changed. The lights are out and it seems abandoned now. Strange. What happened to this place? Exploring the area further, we find a knife in the bathroom of one of the patient's rooms. There's blood everywhere. We can use the knife to break things and access new areas that were blocked off to us before. Making it out of the main doors, we find the hallways of the hospital. Reaching the bottom levels, we find a flashlight in one of the rooms. Exploring the hospital further, the game slowly builds up in intensity. As we explore one destroyed room after another, we find bloodied up hospital beds. And the feeling creeps up on us that something must have went terribly wrong. Making it around this corner, we find a bed with what seems like a covered corpse. But when we turn our backs to it, we might not be completely alone here. Well, with our paths being blocked, the only way out we can find is through a window. We parkour our way around the side of the building, climbing on some scaffolding, and making it to another window that lets us access a new area. We find a path that leads to the left, but it's blocked off. The lights seem to have fallen down, electrifying our path and enabling us to pass underneath it. We find a note on the floor. Dear janitor, I have a problem with some lights. Could you please turn off the electricity for a short while so I can fix it? Our first objective, turn the power off. Exploring the rest of the top level, we find a gun on a table. Suddenly feeling much safer now. We reach a personnel-only section of the building, with the power generators. We turn the power off, turning off the current from the broken lights and allowing us to pass under. But this also means that we'll have to make the track back in complete darkness, with our only source of illumination, our flashlight. This is where the game actually begins, and right as we make it out, we encounter our first enemy, a Twitcher. Twitchers are zombie-like enemies, and outside of their grunts, they are completely silent when they walk. They can break out of almost anything to jump you and have these really disturbing twitching hits. They can also get really fast and can be dangerous in numbers, quickly blocking your path and cornering you. We're gonna be dealing with a lot of these throughout our journey. Making it back to the hallway with the broken lights, we can finally pass under. We make it into a room with a button on a table and writing on the wall that reads, each color/button for each door. This is a hint. Pressing a button opens a door at the original level we started at, enabling us to take a ladder down a really sketchy shaft, which lets us reach another area. We eventually reach a level with an accessible elevator opening. Jumping down the elevator, we find more pill bottles from earlier. These pills act as the primary source of health for the player. They can be easily found in abundance throughout the game. All we know is that they are painkillers and that our main character really needs to take them. The game makes it pretty obvious that David is addicted to this medication, causing him to be dependent on them story-wise, but also in-game as the primary source of health. While the game gives us very little to go off of plot-wise, we can find some information in the game's wiki. David Leatherhoff is the protagonist of Afraid of Monsters. He is a mentally ill man who is addicted to a mysterious painkiller being mailed to him by an unknown company. After receiving bottle after bottle of an unknown drug from an anonymous source, David decides to seek help at a local hospital. After wandering into the bathroom, David finds yet another bottle of the drug before him. Unable to control himself, he takes the pills. Soon after, he passes out and delves into a nightmare. Sometime later, David awakens to a now abandoned hospital late at night. Okay, this gives us a little bit more info about who David is and why he found himself in this situation. But this also raises some questions. Who is shipping him these pills? And why do they give him hallucinations every time David takes them? Back at the elevator, we break through the broken floor, taking a ladder down and entering an opened ventilation shaft, where we encounter a new enemy called the hand crab, a rotting head with a hand emerging from its mouth. If you didn't notice, the hand crab is a modification of the head crab, an enemy from the original Half-Life. And in fact, all the enemies in Afraid of Monsters are essentially just reskins and remodels of the base enemies from Half-Life 1. Except for the Twitchers, which are a modification of the zombies from the Half-Life 1 mod, They Hunger. They have been slightly modified, given a sped-up animation and fast-twitching heads. The good news is, we're almost out of the hospital. Making it down to the garage, from here we reach a basement area, which gives us access to a back door that lets us outside. For the rest of the game, we go through a multitude of environments. First through the city, then through the sewers, the subways, which take us to a new section of the city, where we then go through apartments until we find a large garage with a working vehicle. David gets in, finally able to escape this hellhole of a city, and drives off into the night. An undisclosed amount of time later, David reawakens again. Having swerved off the road onto a tree, we find ourselves in the middle of nowhere. This forest area makes up the majority of the late game, filled to the brim with monsters and entities that we'll have to battle through. The darkness and the dense trees make it really hard to see what's in front and where we're supposed to go. We eventually find a cemetery. Next to it, a small shed. Inside there are stairs that take us down to the basement, which has a door that brings us to a hidden mansion. This hidden mansion has a secret entrance, hidden in its chimney. Once we're able to open it and go through, we reach the final level of the game, a level called Heaven. But it sure as hell doesn't look like a heaven to me. Eventually reaching the final boss battle. After defeating all the enemies and escaping in time, the game ends, and we get the first ending of Afraid of Monsters. David wakes up in a strange house. Disorientated and confused, he hears the sounds of police sirens outside. When he looks around him, David sees multiple dead bodies laying on the floor. he exits the house and surrenders himself to the police. In the second ending, David is being interrogated by a detective. Unable to recall much of what had happened, David looks physically distressed. And in the third ending, a prison guard is sitting reading a newspaper with the headlines, "Psychotic Killer Claims Over 27 Victims." The guard gets up, walks down the hallway, opens the sliding window shaft to David's cell to find the final plot twist of Afraid of Monsters is that the entire game has been one long psychotic episode, caused due to an overdose of the painkiller medication David took in a hospital bathroom. Our entire journey through the hospital, the city, and the rest of the areas wasn't us fighting monsters, but instead it was a drug-induced psychotic rampage that costed the lives of 27 victims. Unable to deal with the guilt, David decides to end it all. It's a pretty gruesome and depressing way to end the game. Afraid of Monsters actually has a fourth and secret ending that you wouldn't see unless you play through all three different endings and were paying real close attention throughout the entire playthrough. See, through all different ending routes, we can come across these pieces of paper with numbers and letters on them. If we actually kept a record of all these letters, we can actually find a secret room in the heaven level, which has numbers all over it. Solving the puzzle using these codes unlocks a door, which takes us to a level that resembles the same hospital we started the game at, but the entire level begins to twist and turn. Eventually, it spits us out onto an apartment building, where we come face to face with another David. David has to fight this version of himself, an entity known solely as the Addiction. After beating the boss, the game cuts one last time. David is laying on a hospital bed surrounded by doctors. The sound of his heart monitor flatlining can be heard as the doctors discuss his apparent overdose. Miraculously though, after a few moments, David's heart monitor begins beeping again. He is alive. And the entire game has been nothing but a nightmare in David's mind. Afraid of Monsters is a Half-Life 1 horror mod following a drug addict through a psychotic episode that turns into a drug-induced rampage, where the enemies and the monsters that we thoughtlessly kill throughout the entire game turn out to be the innocent people that David comes across. First through the hospital, then the city, and finishing off in a countryside, all while the entire time the police are after us, finally catching up with us in one of the homes in the middle of the forest. David wakes up in the final moments before his arrest to find himself surrounded by dead bodies. Confused, he hands himself in, only to find out later while being interrogated what he truly did. Unable to live with his actions, David decides to end it all. David is our unreliable narrator, whose inability to distinguish reality from hallucinations has created this entire apocalyptic environment we've been playing through. The fact that the game forced us to keep taking the pills to regen our health might have been David's hallucinations in his mind that he needs to keep taking them or else he dies. But what I haven't told you yet, perhaps the most impressive part about this, was that this entire mod that we've just played through was created by a 12-year-old. Andreas Rönnberg started working on this mod at the age of 12 and released it 2 years later at the age of 14. In a devlog series uploaded by Andreas, also known as Rumple, titled The Making of Afraid of Monsters, he recalls that Afraid of Monsters started off as just him playing around with the modding tools of Half-Life 1, trying to make a horror mod. This initial version was titled All the Ugly Monsters. It was only once he realized that he had created something with the potential to be great that he decided to finish the project and release it as Afraid of Monsters. a mod that would see great success for being so ahead of its time, and for its time, Afraid of Monsters was really impressive. But what this video is really about is of what Rumpel would make after Afraid of Monsters. See, Andreas would release Afraid of Monsters in 2005. 2 years after, he would form a small group with 3 other passionate modders and developers titled Team Siceglar, and they would work on a definitive edition for Afraid of Monsters, releasing that in 2007 under the name of Afraid of Monsters: The Director's Cut, an all-around improved version of the original with new enemies, models, maps, etc. But the team's magnum opus would come another 5 years after that, another mod project for Half-Life 1 that was somewhat of a spiritual successor in terms of themes and overall vision. A mod that would be everything that Afraid of Monsters tried to be, but better. And this mod would be called Cry of Fear.
Felt alone. My whole life. For as long as I can remember. I don't know if I like it. Or if I'm just used to it. But I do know this. Being lonely does things to you. Feeling shit, bitter and angry all the time just eats away at you.
The game begins with our main character, Simon, on his commute back home from school. On a cold winter night, Simon's routine is abrupted by the cries of help.
Help me. Somebody.
Oh, shit.
An old man had fallen down on the floor.
What happened?
Simon is caught off guard, but runs to help the old man anyways. Simon wakes up in a dark alley.
Where am I?
Confused by where he is or how he got here.
How did I get here?
He receives a text message on his phone. But it's out of data again. And the game drops us off from here on out, lost in a city with our only path going forward. And from the very start, the atmosphere can be felt immediately. Entering a tunnel, we see a figure moving in the corner of our eyes. Once we chase it down, we find only blood trails leading to a metal door. It's locked. Leaving the tunnel, we make it out to another back alley. This one is even more decrepit, and Simon is starting to see some hallucinations. We go down the stairs and through a door leading to a maintenance area. It's dark here, which prompts the game to let us know that we can use our trusty phone's flashlight to illuminate the way. In this game, we have a real inventory system, something that was completely missing in Afraid of Monsters. This system is very reminiscent of classic survival horror games, allowing us to equip different tools and weapons, but at the limit of only 6 slots. This is Simon's phone. It's a Sony Ericsson W610i, and it's arguably the most useful tool we have on us. Not only is the phone used throughout the game as a tool to progress the story, but it is also our only source of light, for now. The good news is, unlike Afraid of Monsters, the phone's battery won't run out, at least not anytime soon, which means that's one extra thing we won't have to worry about. And it seems like the message we got at the beginning was from our mother, worried about us. She asks us to come home before dark, but I think it's a little bit too late for that. One really cool thing about Cry of Fear is the ability to dual wield any 2 items that we have in our equipable slots, allowing us to use our weapons without losing the light. Coming out of the tunnel, we find narrow city streets that lead us to a main square area, which is also eerily quiet. One building here has its door open. Curious, we make our way inside to find an ordinary restaurant, but in the back room, we find a computer. It's password locked. Damn. When exploring the city square, we find some pieces of paper on the floor, one of them reading Jill and David, and the other confused user. Entering these back at the computer unlocks the device, giving us a code. But right as that happens, Simon hears someone making their way inside this building. We find someone peeking through the windows. If we try to follow him, however, well, now that we know the code, there's no need for us to stay here any longer. We make the track back to that locked door. Another useful feature that this game has is the notepad. Throughout the game, Simon will take notes of important pieces of information that the player might need to remember on his notepad. In this case, Simon wrote down a code to unlock the padlock. Entering the door leads us to another dark hallway, which emerges into another back alley, before we see him again. Whoever this person is, they are leading us somewhere. But the question emerges, who are they? And how do they know our phone number? Entering the door leads us to more dark hallways where we find an old tape recorder. Simon comments that he can use these to record his thoughts and experiences. These tape recorders can be found throughout the game and are this game's version of a save point. Continuing down the path, Simon comes face to face with something otherworldly.
Hey! I gotta call police! Damn it!
No signal.
This is the first enemy we come across in the game, and it is known as a slower. Slowers are this game's version of the Twitchers, making them the most common enemy we'll come across. They are zombie-like creatures and come in a wide variety. We also find a syringe on the floor. These are morphine syringes, a medication used mainly for pain relief. They are this game's version of a health pack and regen both health and stamina at the same time. When we pick it up for the first time, the game tells us a syringe containing 1 dose of morphine restores health, but too much can be dangerous. When using this item, Simon actually pulls back his sleeve and injects himself, exposing the cut marks on Simon's wrists. The fact that Simon doesn't even question injecting himself with this random syringe perhaps hints at a familiarity that Simon has with this drug. All he says is, "Looks like morphine. This is strong stuff, so I'd better be careful with it." Unlike in Afraid of Monsters though, it is unclear if Simon is an addict or not. The game cleverly uses subtle clues and environmental storytelling like this to reveal more about the world and our characters. We already know from the intro monologue that Simon is a deeply lonely individual, dealing with a lot of pent-up emotions and mental turmoil, anger, bitterness, anxiety, and depression, leading him to engage in self-destructive behaviors as coping mechanisms. After the car accident, Simon's mental reality has seemingly transitioned into the material world, waking up in a dark alley just to find himself alone, in an abandoned, broken-down city, being anxiously stalked by an unknown messenger and preyed upon now by monsters. That's the Simon we play as. That's the main character of Cry of Fear. And if that doesn't tell you enough about what kind of game Cry of Fear really is, well, I guess you'll just have to wait and see. We jumped out the manhole, down to a sewer where more slowers are waiting for us. We find a lever which opens a door, taking us back out on the other side. But not before we receive a new text message. Only this time, it's from a different number. "Help me. Please help. They are coming. I'm inside the apartments. Hurry." It seems like someone is in the city with us, in need of help, stuck in the apartment building, giving us a new objective to find a way inside. The good thing is there's some leftover scaffolding we can parkour up, allowing us to access and open the balcony door. We've made it into the apartments. Simon comments how this place gives him a strange feeling. And we receive our next message, which only reads 4th floor. We find a paper note left on the ground, titled Secret Note Number 1. It's a really creepy note retelling about someone stalking children playing in a park and hinting at a potential kidnapping, all done through some sort of poem. This is our first introduction to the apartment predator, a serial killer and child predator who lived in this building, or potentially still does. By entering the first apartment to the right, we come across our second enemy type in the game, known solely as the children. They're not that much more dangerous than the slowers, except they move faster and wield 2 knives. They appear as rotting corpses of small children, wrapped up by duct tape and black garbage bags. These enemy types can only appear in the apartments and can't be found anywhere else in the game. They are believed by many to be the victims of the apartment killer, the same victims he writes about on his notes, that have somehow reawakened again, attacking anyone they come in contact with. It's definitely one of the saddest enemy types in the game. Seeing a pathway in the balcony that leads us to the staircase. Going up to level 4 where our messenger is supposed to be, we find the door locked, which means we'll need to find another way around. The only door here that's open is that of level 2. another note on the floor. This one is even creepier and talks about how every time the apartment killer goes for the children, their parents always come looking for them, which is why he always has to kill them. Going into the bedroom confirms that this is indeed the serial killer's apartment. We find a syringe and a key on the floor. But the room has been turned into some sort of collage or shrine of sorts for all his victims, with pictures taken of their bodies and crime scenes, titling each one like Collection 11, Collection 04, Tasted Bad, Rotted Too Quickly, and Slowest Death Yet. This is by far one of the darkest and most disturbing parts of the game, and it definitely creeped me out more than any other section. It's a powerful example of environmental storytelling that continues this side narrative of the apartment killer, revealing just how sick and depraved he really was. And the fact that this can be easily missed by players who aren't paying close attention further highlights the level of detail the developers put into this world. It also demonstrates how unafraid the game is of tackling very dark subject matter that many other developers would never dare to explore. The whole point of this part, I believe, is to convey that sometimes the worst monsters are humans, and often those we least suspect, like in this case, a next-door neighbor. Leaving a room, we see a vision of all the victims before we encounter a new enemy, the baby. These enemies run towards the player before their heads explode, exposing a large spike that they try to impale you with. These enemies are also, most likely, more incarnations of the victims of the predator. Leaving this apartment, we check the key that we picked up, and it has a note on it reading, "Neighbor across." Entering the apartment across the hallway, we are ambushed by another zombie child. This apartment, for some reason, has a broken wall, the wall that's connected to the apartment next door. Finding more slowers and child zombies, we eventually make it to a third apartment, where we find something interesting. It seems like there's a decomposing body of someone who was crawling through the plenum space, his hand still holding a gun. Simon reaches for the gun when a key drops from the body. It's the hall key. Finally armed with a weapon, we make it out to the main hallway, which takes us to a secondary staircase with an elevator, but it seems stuck. Making it up the third level, there's a door here that stands out from the rest, but pay no attention to it now, we'll come back to it later. We find the third letter. This one explains how the serial killer put a code lock on the elevator so that people would have to take the stairs instead, making it easier for him to reach people coming up the stairs. Entering the hall on the bottom level, we find a different elevator that can take us to level 4. Finally, at level 4, we find a fourth note on the floor, this one describing one of his murders. We receive another text message once we reach a door all covered in blood at the end of the hall. All it reads is, "In here." We enter the apartment. We find the apartment serial killer, dead in a pool of his own blood. Simon questions whether he had done this himself or someone else had done this to him. There's also some pills here on the side of the tub. If you couldn't tell, these are actually the exact same pills as the ones David was addicted to in Afraid of Monsters. Perhaps a connection between the two games. Fun fact, years back a post was made on the Cry of Fear Facebook page about this exact scene. It reads, "One hell of a mess from killing yourself. No wonder, seeing what kind of pills he took. Hint." Confirming that this was indeed self-inflicted, and that it might have been those same pills that caused him to do it. Something to take note of is that the phone number from the person in need of help that guided us here is 460-983-72. and it sent us the first message once we reached the outside of the apartment, sending us a text asking for help and saying, "They are coming, I'm inside the apartment." While the initial unknown messenger that messaged us looked to the right in the city is a completely different phone number, being 460-32-738. While we are barely able to make up what the stalker from the city looks like, appearing mostly as just a shadowy figure, we do catch a quick glimpse of him during the scene back at the restaurant, seeing as he's wearing a striped shirt and a white mask over his head. His model appears more like a slower rather than the serial killer, but he only guides and stalks us in the city, as in the moment we reach the apartments, we don't see or hear from him again. It's even unclear if the second unknown messenger was the serial killer. If the killer was already well dead by the time Simon entered the apartment, how could he be messaging and guiding us the entire time? He even knew exactly where we were, giving us direct directions like 4th floor when we entered the building, or in here when we finally reached the apartment door. So, who are these unknown messengers? Are they even real? Or maybe there's something more. If the corpses of the children were able to reincarnate once again, then maybe whoever was asking us for help or guiding us in the city was something close to that. Maybe some sort of vengeful spirit that wanted us to uncover the truth. Or maybe it's all in Simon's head. Simon picks up a key he finds in a tub of blood. It's the basement key. On our way down to the basement, we encounter a new enemy. This one is called the Faster, but for some reason, our initial pathway to the stairs has been blocked off by metal bars. Tracing our steps back to the main floor level, we finally reach the basement door. We find the basement flooded with water. After reaching the other end, we unlock a door, and it's within this new area where we encounter a new enemy, the Drowned. This one is different from any other enemy we've encountered so far, being that when a player is exposed to her for too long, she can actually take control of Simon, forcing him to turn the gun onto himself. We have to fight through a couple more Drowned before reaching a lower level. In this room, there are multiple nooses hanging from the ceiling and a wooden chair in the middle, all bloodied up, showing signs of torture. We find a cassette tape on the table, but we need a VHS to play it, which means going back up to the apartments to find one. We eventually find one in none other than the serial killer's apartment. Playing the tape, we see what happened in the basement. The killer was filming himself torturing someone before chopping their heads off. The camera cuts to a view of the body with 4 digits written on it in blood. These are the codes for the elevator. Going back there and putting the codes in, Simon takes the elevator further below. Reaching an area that looks almost identical to the building we're at, except it's all covered in blood and metal bars are blocking every path. This part of the game reminds me a lot of the Otherworld from Silent Hill. The Otherworld, also known as the Other Side or the Nightmare World, is a nightmarish realm that manifests at the border where reality and unreality intersect. A place both close and distant, shaped by the minds and psyches of those within it, transforming familiar environments into grotesque, horrifying versions of themselves. Blood, rust, and decayed elements pervade these spaces. Similarly, this area in the game feels like a dark reflection of the apartment. The once familiar building is now a nightmarish landscape, covered in blood, rust, and obstructive metal bars, creating a sense of dread. It's almost like it's visualizing the true nature of the building, transforming it from normalcy to this twisted, oppressive version that mirrors the unsettling nature of the dark and disturbing events that were taking place here. While going down from level to level and going even lower, we finally reach the bottom level, a level made up of long hallways. At the end, we find a door, but something else is waiting for us on the other side. This is the first boss fight in Cry of Fear. Having accidentally entered the lair of the Sower, a tall, lengthy, chainsaw-wielding creature with nails protruding from all over its body. But this enemy isn't as difficult as it looks. All we have to do is keep moving backwards, deal as much damage to it as possible to cause it to fall down, where we can then reach its weak spot on its back. After dealing enough damage, the Sower stops and chops its own head off with its chainsaw. Due to the intensity of the whole thing, Simon throws up and passes out. The game cuts into a black and white cutscene of someone's apartment, before cutting back to Simon again, passed out somewhere else.
Did I pass out? Huh? Who's that?
Relax, I am not one of them.
Who are you then?
I'm nobody.
What?
You shouldn't be here. It's very dangerous.
Wait, why are you wearing a gas mask?
Are you stupid or something? Do I look like I want to turn into one of them? I can't trust you. I don't know if you're real. Just leave me alone.
This is the first time that Simon has come face to face with another somewhat normal human being since the start of the game. A gas mask wearing stranger that the game only identifies as the Doctor. When asked why he's wearing a gas mask, he hints to Simon that it's to keep him from turning into one of them. Then he says that he can't trust us because he doesn't even know if we're real before leaving. How strange. This entire interaction is very cryptic and creates even more questions for us than answers. Could it really be something in the air that's causing all this? The reason why there's all these monsters and creatures running around? If that's the case, then why were we not affected? Why haven't we turned into one of them, like the Doctor said? Anywho, we leave through the door, emerging in a hallway where we encounter a new form of enemy, the Crouched, a deformed version of the Slower, crawling on all fours backwards. We eventually make it out of this basement, coming back out on top into a back alley. It's raining now. We get ambushed by some more crouchers, and we eventually find a magazine on the floor. Ripped magazine article. Most of it is too dirty to make out. It seems to be an article about depression. Sounds familiar. Don't delay. Call 543-214 today. The game prompts us to use our phone and dial for this depression helpline.
Hello? Hello? Who is this? What the fuck are you talking about? I need help, please! God damn it! Help me!
The voice on the other end talks in cryptic ways, and then gives us a number, 5247. It just so happens that the door right in front of us has a keypad. This number that we just called is completely different from the two numbers that were texting us at the start, but it's another case of an unknown messenger guiding us to find our way through our phone. Could it be that all three different numbers are all coming from this unknown voice? Entering the number on the keypad, we unlock the door, reaching another basement. We find another manhole that we can go down to reach the sewers. Here we have to find a new enemy called the Sumo. They're similar to the Slowers, except they mainly attack using their tongues, which shoot out. These enemies come tied up in barbed wire, but they can also break out of their bondage and attack you with their arms. We make it through the sewers, breaking through a drain. We find another police car. This one has crashed into the canal. A police radio can be heard inside. Going deeper into the sewers, we eventually get into an area that's still under construction. After fighting some more enemies, we eventually come across this gruesome scene. It's a man, or at least, it's what remains of him. We can actually pick up this shotgun for ourselves, and also the lighter. If we actually use the lighter near the cigarette, Simon will take a smoke break. The game gives us a moment to reflect on what could have happened here, or what could have driven him to do this to himself. This is the second time we've come across a person who had ended their own life. First, it was a serial killer, and now this. The good news is, I guess, we needed that lighter to solve a puzzle that would allow us to get into this room and find a key. The key lets us continue down the path which the doctor took, and eventually, we find him.
Hey! What the fuck are you doing?
Not you again.
Wait! Oh shit! Is that the key he was talking about?
This boss is called the Mace, and he is completely immune to all damage done to him from the player. The only way to cause any damage is by turning on the valves around the room, causing an electric current to run through the water, electrocuting the monster. This also means that Simon would need to jump on the platform so that we don't get electrocuted in the process. We eventually take the monster down, but we can't go forward because the key is still in his stomach. After looking around, we eventually find a saw. Simon cuts the monster open, retrieving the rusty key. We leave this area, but before we can get to the next door, we are quickly brought back into that other version of reality, the other world, similar to what happened in the apartment. Now the hallways are all rusty and bloody, twisting and turning in abstract ways. Eventually we find ourselves running down a hallway while hands are reaching from the floor and attacking us. Once we make it to the other side, we get a flashback to that same scene from the very start.
Damn it! What was that? Hallucinations? Am I going insane? Shit.
At this point, it's almost certain that something is not right with Simon. Simon questions who that doctor could be, and if it was his fault that all this is happening. Simon questions the fact that he's wearing a gas mask and we're not. Reaching the end of this area, we finally find a ladder that takes us back up above ground. And where it was raining before, now it is snowing. We receive a new text message from Mom. "Are you okay? You better come home now. I'm getting worried." This section of the city is completely new. There's cars crashed everywhere, and it looks like some sort of outbreak took place. We find a bus stop with a map, figuring out that there's a subway we can take from Hanson Square that will take us straight home. Continuing on our way, we eventually come face to face with this. This giant mass of flesh is called the human flower. It has multiple tendrils and human faces emerging from it. Going anywhere near it means instant death, so it acts more like an obstacle rather than an enemy to fight. We have to find a way around it. Luckily, there is. Going through the scroll space, we can circumnavigate the whole thing, emerging from the other side. Making it through an alley in Ronald Street, someone is waiting to say hello. This is called the Saw Run. It is by far the most dangerous entity you can encounter in the game. The only way to truly survive is to run and hope you can get out After a long chasing sequence, we are able to escape him by jumping over a rail. We eventually find a park, which is oddly calm and relaxing. There are no monsters here, but we are locked from going anywhere else beyond this point because this park area is actually a puzzle within itself. There are 4 different statues that we can find. One of a horse, one of a lion, an owl, and an eagle. Each animal has this control pad which has 4 directions we can press. In order to solve this, we have to read and decipher 4 sets of riddles belonging to each animal written on the park map, which can be found near the entrance. It reads, "Silently she flew, quiet as a whisper in the dark. She came upon a river and headed south. 4-legged carnivore sneaked side by side to his prey, ready to strike whenever a movement was made. The king of all the birds flew higher than the owl, gloating as he went. The equestrian beast didn't want her sleep to come, so she flew to the west uncalled." Starting with the eagle, the king of all birds, it flew higher than the owl, which means we have to move the statue up. The owl's riddle is, "Silently she flew. She came upon a river and headed south," which means down. The horse, which is the equestrian beast, she fled to the west uncalled. That's left. And finally the lion. The 4-legged carnivore sneaked side by side to his prey, which means the same position as the horse. Solving this puzzle opens up the shed door for us, in which we find keys and a hunting rifle. We leave out the gate and make our way out the park. Once we reach the main road, however, Simon receives a phone call.
Hello? Hello? I can't hear you. Who is this?
Where are you?
How did you get my number? Can you help me? What the fuck is going on in this town?
I need to speak to you, Simon. I'm up on the roof of this park.
You're... what? You're up on the roof? I can't hear what you're saying. Hello? Hello, are you still there? Ah, shit.
It's someone by the name of Sophie that Simon seems to know. The call is all choppy, making it very hard to make up what she's saying, but it's something about meeting her on a roof. This phone call reminds me a lot of the segments from Silent Hill 2, where Maria's voice is coming through the radio talking to James.
This thing broken? What the? I better take it anyway. I might need it.
One really cool thing about Cry of Fear is all the references that it has that shows homage to the games it got inspired by. We eventually find a key to an apartment building. Making our way up to the roof, we find a broken window, giving us access. We parkour the rest of the way up to the roof where Sophie is waiting for us.
What the... Sophie? What the hell are you doing here?
Oh, hi, Simon.
What? I don't understand anything now.
What is it that you don't understand?
What do you think? The whole fucking city is crawling with monsters and I mean, suddenly you just turn up on these rooftops? What are you doing here? Are you hurt?
Monsters? Simon, you're scaring me.
Scaring? What the fuck? This is just sick. Well, maybe it's just...
Let's talk about something else. How have you been?
I don't know. I'm just confused.
Not too bad, thank you. Better now that you're here.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here too, Sophie. I've been alone all this time.
I see. Sounds tough.
But what about yourself? Why are you here? Are you hiding up here from those things?
No. I really don't understand what you're talking about. I'm just thinking.
Thinking? Yeah, I've been doing a lot of that too. Do you remember how you got here?
I don't know.
Because I woke up myself, but it wasn't an alley and... Wait, I can probably show you.
No. Hush, Simon. Can't we just sit here for a while?
Yeah. Sure.
Do you want to know something?
Yes. Yes, I do. I want to know just what in the fuck is going on here. Is it about that doctor guy? In the gas mask?
Doctor? Simon, please. No, I mean about school.
Yeah? What? But... oh, shit. Damn, so much stuff has happened lately. All this craziness. The darkness and the monsters. I think I'm going crazy. I'm so glad I found you.
I know. A lot of things have been going on lately.
Yeah, really. Was it you who tried to phone me, by the way?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you. To get away from it all.
Oh, but what? Out here?
No, away from everything. Away from all this.
What? What do you mean?
You know full well what I mean.
Wait a sec, you mean all... No! No, no, no! Sophie! Why did she... What the fuck? This isn't making any sense! Was it you who made her do it? Why? Why? You sick fuck!
Before we can even think or make sense of what had just happened, we are dropped right into another boss battle. This is the Carcass, a mutilated humanoid creature restrained to a chair, held up in the air by several chains. It hovers around the building, launching projectiles at us. It's by far one of the strangest looking enemies in game. While Simon blames it for causing Sophie to jump off, it is unclear if that was really the case. Although the fact that it turned up right after Sophie did what she did makes it seem like the two are connected somehow. The thing about this boss battle is that running out of ammo can actually softlock you from finishing it, as there are no other ways to hurt the Carcass without a gun. The game, however, seems to know this, because this is the only boss battle besides the Saw Runner where running from it is an option. Forcing us to escape the battle, we make the decision to run away. Making our way downstairs, we find Sophie's corpse. It triggers a flashback for Simon.
Sophie,
Simon, let me go.
I love you, Sophie.
I have to leave. Please.
I fucking love
Just
you.
let me go, Simon.
Thinking back to it now, the entire conversation between Simon and Sophie was odd to say the least. It seemed like while Simon is stuck in his apocalyptic version of the city, crawling with monsters and nightmares, Sophie seemed like she couldn't see any of it, calling Simon to meet her on a roof so that she could talk to her only friend before leaving this world for good. I also feel like this is another reference to Silent Hill, the way different characters seem to be experiencing completely different versions of what's happening. In Silent Hill, everything in a town is a psychotic projection from the deepest parts of a human's unconscious, with different people seeing different monsters appearing depending on their mental states. For some, the town is a living hell, infested with demonic entities and haunted by monsters, while others who are innocent see the town as just the regular touristic destination it's supposed to be. For Simon, in his reality, he is stuck in an abandoned city, crawling with monsters trying to kill him around every corner. The doctor seems to be experiencing a similar reality as Simon, but he believes that there is some sort of disease going around causing this. This could be because of his medical background influencing his thinking. And Sophie, she doesn't see any monsters, rather her torment is more mental. We pick up a keycard from Sophie, tracking back all the way to a locked door near the park. We use the keycard to get in. We eventually make it all the way to Saxon Avenue. Here there's a new type of enemy, the Suicider. They are the only enemy in-game that use guns. The great thing about them, however, is that they are fairly easy to kill and drop ammo when they die, making them surprisingly useful. We finally find a subway station that will take us to Hanson Square. But in classic fashion, the door is locked. This type of door, however, doesn't need a key, but a fuse in order to unlock it. Leaving the station to search around, we find a new area by the bay, which leads us to a back alley of another building. We parkour our way through and come out on the other side. We find a school. The school has this eerily calming atmosphere. With the lights still on, its halls and rooms still clean, it almost feels like everything is back the way it's supposed to be. We find a screwdriver in one of the classrooms, which lets us unlock a fuse box. As soon as we do, however, now that the power is out, the monsters have reawakened. These new types of enemies are known as the Faceless. They attack in large numbers, emitting a loud screech, and are much faster than the Slowers, both in movement and attack speed. Reaching the front door, we find that it's been locked due to us cutting the power off. But we do find a classroom key, which means we'll have to go back through the entire school once again. After finally making it to the correct classroom, we find an emergency key which lets us unlock the emergency exit. Making a journey all the way back to the subway station, we are finally able to open the door using the fuse we found. Making it down to the train tracks, we find a second manifestation of the human flower, this time having emerged from the ceiling of the tunnel. With the way it's situated on the tracks and the train on the other side, it's quite obvious what we need to do. However, this area is kind of a puzzle within itself. We have to first access the service tunnels, which take us to a control room. Hitting the lever unlocks two doors, both of them on a timer, so we have to move fairly quickly. Once we get to the door, we have to reach another control room before we can finally turn on the lever and activate the train. The train runs over the human flower, killing it and allowing us to go under it without being killed. However, in the process of doing this, our phone runs out of battery. This is something that is scripted to happen at this moment in the story, so it doesn't have anything to do with how much we've used our phone. Once we make it through the doors under the human flower, we find flares. We can use these as an alternative for the phone's flashlight. Flares work very differently from other light sources. Once a flare is ignited, there's no other way to turn it off, meaning every time the player needs to do something else, like climb a ladder, the player has to throw it away. In the section ahead, we have to travel through many surface tunnels, ventilation pipes, parkour our way down some shafts, and run across some train tracks, all while trying not to get ran over. After a long while, we finally emerge on the other side. but it seems like somebody else is here too. It's the doctor again. We catch him shooting somebody and taking something from them. We try to follow him deeper into the station, but it seems like the doors are locked again. This time, we need 2 fuses. We also find keys and a new phone battery on the ground, allowing us to finally recharge our phone. There is a different exit to the outside where we have 2 different paths, Preston Road and Wasbat Gardens. Going down Wasbat Gardens takes us into an alleyway where we come face to face with a new type of enemy, the Taller, a giant monstrosity that kills us in one shot. This enemy also has a ton of health. Emptying an entire magazine on it literally does nothing to it, forcing us to backtrack. So we take the second path. We come across a bus. Inside, we find an M16 assault rifle, finally something that can take down the behemoth we ran across. Going back to that original path, we can finally take down the Taller, giving us access to a new area where we have to fight through even more enemies. Eventually getting to a door which takes us all the way back to where Sophie's body still is. From this point, we basically have to backtrack all the way back to that original entrance of the subway station to get the first fuse. Then, once we have that, we go back to the bus, jump through a window to the other side, and getting into an apartment building through the fire exit. We also find a flashlight here, only this one is no ordinary flashlight. It's an attachable light we can add to our handgun. We make it out on the other side and have to backtrack even more until we reach a familiar looking building. We can find a ladder down the alley, which we can use to climb to the window. Which brings us all the way back to that first apartment building. At this point, it becomes quite obvious how the map of Cry Fear works and how interconnected it really is. Although now, whatever was flooding the basement level when we were here last time is still doing so, because now the entire lower level is submerged underwater. Making it to the room where we found the cassette tape, we find the chair missing. Instead, there's a ladder here that we can pick up. Another detail here that I find strange is that for some reason, there are intense blood stains all over the building. There were some from the window we climbed through, on the walls on the basement, and even on the wall where we leave through. These blood trails weren't here when we first got here, which makes me think, could they be from the only person who we know could have this much blood on them? The apartment predator. Maybe he did survive and made his way out of the basement, leaving a trail of blood behind. Anyways, we can't leave just yet, because we still need to find that second fuse. Making our way up, we come back to that same door that was chained up and locked from before. This time, it has been freed. Going inside, we find an apartment covered in blood. In the middle of the apartment, there is a suspiciously out-of-place shaft going down to God knows where. With no other place to go, we find our courage and go down the bottomless pit. Once at the bottom, we find a long, dark, seemingly endless hallway. Simon begins hearing a voice.
He always goes back to the same place day after day, just watching it like it was yesterday. Despite the fact that it causes him tremendous anxiety, he insists on returning. He insists it's for therapeutic reasons, and I remain skeptical. He doesn't respond well to questions about his personal life, and became extremely angry when I mentioned events prior to what he insists on describing as the Black Day. His school and home life were no-go topics when discussing these feelings and anxieties. He told me the other day that he'd been seeing hallucinations, but couldn't give a clear description of what he'd been seeing. Naturally, I didn't take him seriously. I saw no evidence to suggest this was the case, but upped his prescription anyway. He claims the extra medication helps.
The voice sounds like that of a doctor giving a psychiatric evaluation about one of his patients. More specifically, it seems like he is speaking about Simon. The doctor describes how Simon insists on visiting a certain memory and time every day, a day he calls the Black Day. Even though it causes him a lot of anxiety, Simon claims these visits are therapeutic to him, but he remains skeptical. He also claims Simon to be a very private person about his personal life, especially about his school and home life. He also mentions that Simon said that he's been seeing hallucinations, but couldn't describe them clearly. Even though the doctor didn't fully believe Simon, he increased his medication anyways, which Simon said it helped. Whoever that voice was, he seemed to know Simon quite a bit, but why does he know him this well? And what is he treating him for? And what's this Black Day all about? We eventually find the end of the hallway, which spits us out into a room lined with cages of faceless, and an enemy known as the Face trapped by its neck through a hole in the floor. Eventually the cages open and we have to fight our way out. Once we reach the door, we get jump scared by the Saw Runner before falling to the world. We emerge in a dark room, which takes us to a long hallway that brings us back to the Red Room. Whatever took place in that hallway seems like important information to remember moving forward. The game gives us a second fuse. We go back down and leave the building through the window. This time, however, the blood trails are gone. Strange. We now have 2 fuses. We can get back to the train station and open that door, taking us even deeper underground. We then come across this long walkway with a suspiciously broken wall at the end. Continuing down the path, we eventually find an open train. Going inside, we find a suitcase. I want my feet back. Weird. At the end of the train, we find a sledgehammer. Using this sledgehammer to break that wall gets us into a new area, but something feels wrong. Our path forward bends upwards in an unnatural way, hinting to us that this isn't true reality anymore. We have transitioned into potentially another hallucination. We find broken paths that we have to parkour through, surrounded by hanging cages, within each one a Simon screaming in anguish while cutting his own legs off with a knife. This part here can be really tricky. We have to find our path through these twisting and turning pathways, eventually reaching a door, taking us through a hallway, which takes us to a room. It's a padded cell. This is another puzzle. 4 doors face us in each direction, and we have to use the note to figure out where to go, opening up to a twisting hallway before dropping us off in a maze. This section has these enemies known as the hangmen. They are hanging from hooks which move by rails around the maze. They can be killed and one-tap the player once they come in contact, so the only way around is to avoid them. There are maps around the maze that tell you where you are and where to go. The easiest way to solve this puzzle is to just stick to the right side of the wall no matter what until you find the exit. But not before we have another flashback.
Yes, he suffered severe spinal damage in the accident. It's a miracle he still retains upper body motion. From the waist down, however, there is no nervous response at all, not to mention the mental trauma he suffered. From what I can tell, Simon is a deeply disturbed individual who had mental problems even prior to the accident.
Holy fuck! Holy shit. That was close. Is he still there? What the fuck? Wasn't this where I came from? No. Something is obviously not right. I should hurry now before something else happens.
So, what is going on here? If Simon was paralyzed during the car crash from his intro sequence, then who have we been playing with this entire time? I mean, the game began right after the crash. Simon wakes up in a dark alley his legs fully working, but the world around him has been flipped upside down. Nightmares brought into reality. Could this really be all happening in Simon's head like it was with David? Well, that can't be, because we know Simon isn't in a coma. He is alive and well. He talks with his psychiatrist. We even overhear the doctor talk about us multiple times now, about our condition, physical and mental. Perhaps this is due to the hallucinations he was talking about. Also, can't help but acknowledge the similarities between this doctor and the gas mask doctor. Are they one and the same? Could this be just one massive hallucination that Simon is having? Is any of this even real? Simon gets up. He questions if what he just escaped from was even real. He opens the door to find an ordinary hallway. We walk back to the train. We use the fuse we got to open the gate and get ready to leave this place for good.
Back to the train. Sitting here like a fool. Feels like it was just a few seconds ago I was traveling here. No, think straight. I got hit by a car, woke up, and these things have been trying to kill me since. I mean, what is actually happening with me? Mom keeps telling me to get home, but why? How would that solve any of the crazy shit I've seen? I can't even contact the police here. Everything is just fucked. Could it be that I'm just hallucinating? No, seriously. Am I? Or is there something else? I keep thinking back at that doctor guy. Well, he is crazy, all right. Could he have done something to me, seeing as he wears a gas mask? Or is all this just not real? I'm confused. I'm just very confused. So many questions, but no answers. I'll see what happens when I come home.
Hearing a sound coming from the back, Simon gets up to go investigate. But unfortunately, we get ambushed again. Fighting our way through the train, once it's all cleared, we find something strange, a severed foot that we can pick up. One thing that always catches you off guard when playing this game are the few moments here and there of peace and solitude between all the horror and violence. Moments where you can stop and take a break and enjoy the beauty of this game. We bring the severed foot back to that suitcase and place it. But before we could continue on the journey, the train tracks end abruptly, causing half the train cart to go off rails and fall off the side of the bridge.
Shit. My bag.
Simon survives the crash. Having lost our bag in the process, all our tools and weapons are gone. We have to climb our way out of the train before it falls, making it in the brink of time. We are now stranded in the middle of nowhere. We find ourselves in the middle of a forest, and with our bag gone, we don't even have a source of light. We follow some light we see in the distance to find a lantern and a wooden stick. I guess something is better than nothing, right? This area reminds me a lot of the endgame forest area from Afraid of Monsters. And similar to Afraid of Monsters, this forest area makes it really hard to navigate through all the dense vegetation and darkness, being guided through it solely by lanterns. We eventually find a door, which takes us to another section of the forest where we find a bunker. Emerging on the other side to find a mental hospital in the middle of nowhere. This hospital is completely abandoned. There's graffiti on every wall, and the atmosphere here is intense. We find a flashlight, unlock a door by turning on a generator, which lets us reach the basement. Down here we find a bowling alley with a suspicious note on the counter. There's something strange about Dr. Purnell. Dr. Purnell. I guess we have a name now. Reaching the second level, we find Dr. Purnell waiting for us behind metal bars.
Come over here so we can talk. I want to talk.
What the fuck do you want? You're crazy.
Come closer.
I'm close enough.
Come closer.
I can't. There's a big fucking gate in the way.
That's why I want you to come closer. I'm gonna kill you.
How?
I need a gun.
You got a gun. The subway. The guy you shot. Remember?
I want a new gun.
Look, just open the gate, will you? I'm tired of all this.
No, there's a new gun in the bowling alley. Get it for me. Now.
If I do, will you open the gate for me?
Yes, I have the key right here. Go and get it.
Fine.
The doctor asks us to bring him a gun that's down in a bowling alley, in exchange of opening this gate for us. It's unknown why he needs his gun, or what is he even doing here in the first place. But with no choice, we go down into the basement to retrieve the weapon. We do indeed find it down here hidden in the alley. By bringing the gun back to the doctor, the game actually gives us a choice whether to give him the gun or not. Now this is the second time in the entire game where we had a multiple choice decision. The other was with the carcass, whether to escape it or not. Seeing as we don't have any other choice here since we need the key, we give him the gun.
Here. There's no ammo in it though. Now, give me the key.
Thank you, son. Right in the front. Now with your gun. Here.
Crazy bastard! I'll kill you!
The damaged Simon unlocks a door and finds a room with a key, a phone, and a telescope pointing at a window. It's obvious we need to find a phone number to proceed. The new key unlocks a door which gets us into an empty room with a single chair. When we enter the bathroom, the door shuts behind us and a series of screams and cries can be heard. Once the door opens, there is a half of a broken plate on a chair with some numbers on it. The second half can be found in the bottom levels. Once we put these two together, we get a number in Roman numerals. Calling this number triggers this cutscene. It's revealed a person on the other side of the building with a bag over their head, holding up a sign with a number on it. This number is supposed to open the attic door where Dr. Purnell is waiting for us.
There you are. You're dead. You're so fucking dead.
A gunfight ensues between Simon and the doctor. Once we defeat the doctor, a flashback begins. Simon is sitting on a wheelchair at the doctor's office. Talking about his treatment, the doctor recommends Simon to try a new form of cognitive therapy to help him with his trauma and anxiety. He tells him to start writing a book about his feelings. before we cut back to reality. Having took down Dr. Purnell, we leave the attic to try and find the exit. And for the first time in the entire game, we can hear birds. And the sky, it's finally bright out. The night is over. We break out the mental hospital with the final goal: find our way home. Simon finds a boat and uses it to row across a lake. This part almost feels like a reference to the boat scene from Silent Hill. The entire sequence mirroring a sequence from Silent Hill 2, even down to the camera angle. We finally reach the other side. We enter a house, but even though the night is over, the monsters aren't done yet. We fall through the floor into a basement where we have to battle even more enemies. And then we have to go through a sewer, battling even more. Finally, we reach the end. We climb out to find ourselves in Simon's town. We're finally home. But not even this small peaceful town is spared from nightmares. Battling our way through the streets, we finally reach Simon's home. Making our way inside, Simon calls for his mom.
Mom!
However, she is nowhere to be found.
Where are you? Mom! Mom!
Making it into a room, we find an opened book on a chair. Simon goes to pick it up. When we get another flashback, shocked from the vision, we are back in the same overworld hell dimension. We run through this maze trying to make it out as it twists and turns underneath our feet. Until we get to a spire of books. Climbing up them, we find ourselves in a corridor taking us to the same elevator from the apartment building. Simon takes the elevator down, and it takes us to a room with the real Simon sitting on a wheelchair behind a cage. This is the final boss battle. Just like in Cry Fear, we have to fight against ourselves. As hordes of enemies of Faceless attack us, we eventually find enough valves to be able to open the gate on Simon. Unable to defend himself, we watch as our Simon beats the life out of presumably the real Simon. Choking him on the floor, we watch as the light slowly fades from his eyes. The game cuts to a final scene in Simon's home. His body lifeless on the table. The police break into the apartment to find him and Sophie killed in a tub. On his final note, Simon reveals his feelings of hopelessness, isolation, anxiety, and depression. The one person Simon claimed who tried to help him was his doctor, whose idea was to write a book. Simon thanks him for helping him put things into perspective, helping him realize how fake everyone around him was, making him despise those closest to him for abandoning him. Simon decided not only to leave this world for good, but also to take Sophie with him. As he writes, he wanted to keep her all to himself. And that is Cry Fear. It's definitely not the happy ending we were expecting, I guess. Playing as a deeply disturbed individual whose choices and decisions end up not only hurting him, but also the people closest to him. The game doesn't hold its punches at all, up until the very end. Well, this would be the very end if it was the only ending. In fact, this game has 4 main endings, each one different from the last, and each one is affected by decisions we made throughout our playthrough. Remember how during the entire game there were only 2 times when the game gave us a multiple choice? Well, it turns out that those moments were more crucial than they first seemed. The truth is, by escaping the carcass on our first run of the game, we had already damned ourselves to only be able to experience 2 endings. The first one is one we got. This ending happens when Simon fails to kill the carcass, but trusts the doctor and gives him the gun at the hospital. In this ending, Simon takes his own life and Sophie's, but thanks the doctor for being the only one to actually help him. If we didn't trust the doctor during that hospital section and didn't give him the gun, while the game events wouldn't have changed much, the fact that Simon was untrusting of him causes us to have the second ending, one where Simon not only takes his own life and Sophie's, but also the life of Dr. Purnell. This ending beginning in a shot of a newspaper reading, "Doctor found dead, mysteriously killed in his apartment." Simon confesses to killing both Sophie and the doctor, blaming everyone for his misfortune. His heart full of hatred, he writes, "I wish I could have taken everybody with me. But unfortunately, my situation makes that impossible." If, however, we did kill the carcass, this automatically spares Sophie's life and unlocks endings 3 and 4. In the third ending, Simon kills the carcass but doesn't trust the doctor with the gun. This causes Simon to take both his life and the doctor, blaming him and everyone else for his misfortune, except Sophie, writing on his note, "Tell her I'm sorry." It is only in the fourth ending, the one where Simon kills the carcass and trusts the doctor, where things play out a bit different. In this one, instead of Simon taking his own life, he stops himself, and we instead take control of the real Simon on the wheelchair. And the roles are reversed, where we have to battle against the other Simon we've been playing with the entire time. Once we do defeat him, we cut back to reality. Simon finds himself holding a gun in his hand. He had overcome his tendencies and forgiven Sophie. But in the process, while in this psychosis state, he had shot and killed the 2 officers that came to check up on him. The therapy had worked. Simon finally was able to find peace through expressing himself by writing on his book, climaxing with the literal battle at the end with himself, with the version of himself that he created. But even that came at a cost. The game wasn't happening in Simon's mind like we thought it was, and like it was for David. Rather, it was the representation of Simon's mind through the book. As we went through the game, each monster we faced was a section of Simon's trauma. Fears, anxieties, depressions. That's what we were battling. And the decisions we were faced with were the conclusions of how Simon felt about the 2 people closest to him. The carcass represented whether Simon cared enough for Sophie to battle the creature. After her fall, by leaving the battle, whether it was on purpose or whether you were soft-locked, this was Simon making up the decision in his mind, or rather, in his book. After her rejection, this decision reflected whether Simon still loved Sophie as a friend, or resented her for not expressing the same feelings back. As for Dr. Purnell, it's an obvious choice of trust for Simon. Do we trust him with the gun or not? This represents Simon's feelings towards his doctor's true intentions. It is only once Simon comes in terms with his relationship with Sophie and trusts his doctor for trying to help him where we can have the quote-unquote good ending. The ending where Simon doesn't end himself. If Afraid of Monsters was David fighting against his addiction, Cry of Fear is Simon fighting against his own depression. Demons that have been haunting him. Demons that were personified through his book. This is further proven by how certain enemies are direct manifestations or projections of Simon's own traumas, illnesses, and feelings. The Taller is the game's representation of Simon's overwhelming depression, as he looms over him like a giant. The Drowned, the Suicider, and the Hanger represent Simon's own urges for ending himself. The Saw Runner represents Simon's anxiety attacks, strong, fast, and it could come at any random moment. The Stranger, an enemy we encounter at the very end, is a literal manifestation of the book, representing how the book is starting to take a toll on Simon. And the Sumo and the Hangman, both enemies tied and bound, represent Simon's own feelings of being trapped within his own body, unable to move, stuck on tracks. Other enemies like the children in the apartment, the face, the faceless, the human flower, and many more, their significance to Simon is less obvious and could allude to some other deeper traumas or feelings, maybe from his past. The game is as close as we can get to personifying mental illness into a tangible form as a video game. It signifies everything that could go wrong in a person's mind: the fear of losing control, the isolation, and the despair. The clear amount of work and dedication that went into creating Cry-Fear shows through every frame of the game. From the handcrafted soundtrack to the countless Easter egg and references, everything we see has a direct correlation with Simon's mental states and psychology. So much so that Cry-Fear has left a deep impact on everyone that's played it for the last decade or so. People find peace through this game and relate to Simon's struggles, seeing reflections of their own fears and experiences through him. Simon, a flawed protagonist who was from the very start doomed into a downward spiral of madness and despair, captivates many with his tragic journey, and this game has left its mark on me too. Both games, especially Cry-Fear, exceeded my expectations of what a horror mod can actually bring to the table. They don't just scare us, they make us think, feel, and understand the complexities of the mind in ways few other mediums can achieve. And I hope that this isn't the last time we hear from Team Sykes Color. I think I'm gonna head home now. It's getting dark. And I'll see you very soon.